Hi, if you don't have professional experience as a React developer yet, you probably don't know how real-world teams operate. So today I want to explain and walk you through a typical planning session as it's done in professional developer teams. We'll start with an introduction to a typical product team and the feature lifecycle. Then we'll look at a Kanban board, as you will also find it in the real world. We will refine a couple of user stories that are predefined by the product manager. We will discuss them. We will estimate them with Storypoints, and finally break them into smaller tasks, as it's here. Everything is based on professional designs, as you can see here. And in upcoming videos, we'll build a React application based on these tasks and designs. And finally, you'll be able to implement some of the features on your own in my upcoming React Job Simulator. If that sounds interesting to you, you can find a waitlist in the description of this video. Okay, let's get going. So the first step is to explain how a typical product team looks like. So the first role that I want to mention is the product manager, or in the Scrum terminology, it's also often called the product owner. This person, they have responsibilities like gathering requirements for feature requests. They write user stories or the tasks that the development team has to implement. They communicate with the designer to develop the designs. So basically they are the connection between the business side and the development team. The next is the designer. This is relatively obvious. The designer gets the requirements from the product manager and develops the designs. This is, of course, an iterative approach. And then finally, that's where we are, the developers. I just have one image here, but usually there's like one product manager, maybe one designer, and a few developers in one team. The designer might also be shared between multiple teams, because usually the development is the bottleneck here. Okay, so how does a feature lifecycle look like? This is not necessarily true for every team, and it's a bit like limited perspective because it's my perspective as a developer. So we start with a product manager and designer, and so somebody in the company or outside the company, maybe a user or a manager from the company, they have a feature request. They have an idea. Maybe the product manager has an idea. And so there's a feature request. Let's build XYZ page, for example. The product manager now gathers all the requirements, and finally they write user stories. User stories, we will see that in a bit. It's a type of task which is written in the form from the perspective of a user. And then the product manager and the designer collaborate to create the designs based on this, on the requirements. Then the next step, that's the developers. Actually, it's a team effort, but I put it as developers. The product manager, once the user stories are ready, they will gather the team of developers and maybe the designer as well, and they will have a refinement session. So this is in Scrum workflows, but also, I guess, in Kanban. This just means that we will have a list of tasks, and we will go through each task, and the developers have a look at it. They discuss it with the product manager, and finally they will ask questions and prepare the user stories so that they are ready for development. Then the next step is estimation. This is commonly done in Scrum and Kanban, not necessarily, but possibly as well. Estimation is usually not time estimation, because that's very difficult to do, but rather something like Storypoints, which is usually a number from the Fibonacci series, so 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. This is more of an effort or complexity estimation. Sometimes you can also use t-shirt sizes like small, medium, large. Yeah, it depends on the team, but very commonly people use Storypoints, and then they use something called Storypoint Poker, where the product manager presents the user story, and then every developer picks a number from this Fibonacci series, and then on the count of 3 they will all reveal their choice and discuss later. And then finally, when the estimation is done, the implementation starts. In Scrum, this is often in the context of a sprint. So before the sprint starts, the whole team gathers. They will decide which task they want to tackle in the sprint. A sprint is usually or often 2 weeks long, and then like the developers, based on the estimations, can kind of guess how many of these tickets they can do. Yeah, and once the implementation is done, the testing and QA or quality assurance part starts. So basically the implementation is tested either inside a pull request, for example, like a test deployment, or maybe also in production, which is not so cool. But yeah, this is it depends on the team. Sometimes you have QA engineers who are like designated roles to test the implementation. Sometimes the developers do QA, sometimes the product manager. Yeah, but typically not the developer who implemented the task. And then finally, once QA is through, it will be merged to the main branch and then deployed to production. Today, I want to focus on the refinement and estimation part. So we assume that we have a product manager, and the product manager created already some user stories, the designer created some designs, and now it's our task to gather as developers and do the refinement and estimation. So this is a typical board, it's a Kanban board, where we have different swim lanes, I guess it's called. Backlog, this is everything that's not estimated yet and has to be discussed. Then to do, once it's estimated and discussed, the tickets will go to do. Then when the developer starts working on it, it will be in progress. Then they create a PR, a pull request, move it to in review and wait for another developer to review the ticket or the code. And then once it's in review, it may be moved to done, or sometimes there's a QA step in between, depends on the team. Yeah, so let's have a look at the first task. So you can see this is called a user story. And I can show you what it means. Let's open this as a page. So a user story, this means that we have a typical format. As a user, I want a navigation so that I can easily find and visit the most important pages. So the goal of a user story is to explain what the user gains from this feature. It's usually something that's rather small, can be done in a few days or maybe a week. Yeah, but there might be multiple technical tasks involved. So then we have a design. This is here. We will also have a look at the design on Figma here. And then we have a list of acceptance criteria here. We will look at those in a bit. But first, let me show you the designs that for this application. So the goal is to build an error logging application. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but this is kind of, if you have a front-end application or also like back-end application, of course, you can use error logging tools to catch errors and send them to a cloud service. And there you can, the developers or the team can get access to these errors. So you can basically see how many problems you have in the code base, how many bugs there are, and you will get hints like stack traces and like on which browsers this happens and so on. There are already, of course, tools like Sentry, for example, Rollbar. These are some of the popular tools that are used. And the goal here is to build such an application ourselves. I think it's a pretty nice application because it's data-driven, so you will often encounter this in the real world with React applications, for example. So here we can see the sidebar navigation in different states. Also here a quick overview. Here's a project list, for example. So yeah, list of projects. Then here we have an issue overview with like somewhat complicated table and some interactive elements here. And yeah, then UI kit and some components and so on. But yeah, let's start with the sidebar navigation. So first, when the developer looks at this story, you can read this as well if you like. It's pretty clear what the purpose of this is. And now let's check out the acceptance criteria. So implement on desktop as collapsible site navigation. So basically, this is the expanded state and this is the collapsed state, okay? And then implement on mobile as an overlay. So here we have the mobile navigation bar or like header. And then once you click the button here, as it says here, that slides in from the left when clicking the menu icon. Okay, you click here and then this overlay slides in. And then when you click close, it closes again, slides out to the left. Okay, so here we can already see there's an arrow, slides out to the left. Now let's assume that we have a list of like a team of developers and somebody has something they would like to mention. Here I left a comment already. Please add the current page should be highlighted. So the acceptance criteria here, the product manager, they missed that this selected the current page is here highlighted. Here the issues, for example. So let's add another to-do item. The current page, the current item should be highlighted. Okay. So this was the first refinement session. Now everything is clear, at least from my perspective. Now it's time to do the estimation. So estimation means that, yeah, as I said, we assign a story point in this example. And as I said, this is the Fibonacci series, so 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. This is just like with increasing complexity of a task, the estimation gets more uncertain. So for example, the 2 and 3, you can tell a difference, but then between 5 and 8, it doesn't make sense to assign a 7 or a 6. So this is why we use the Fibonacci series. And now, maybe if you don't know yet, but you can use this as a practice now, you can pick a number in your head. Maybe stop the video for a bit. I will pick mine, and then we can tell. A 1, for example, maybe we need some ground rules. A 1 is something really simple from my perspective. For example, changing a text or changing a color or something. This is really simple, really fast. And then, yeah, the others just grow accordingly. So now let me count until 3. And then we will reveal our numbers. 1, 2, 3. So I would pick a 3, and I'm not sure what you pick, but if you said something else, then we would start discussing. Like typically, the developer who picked the lowest number would argue for their case, and the developer who picked the largest number, they would also argue for their case. In our case, like if you selected something different, that's totally normal. There's no problem with it. In the team, you would at some point everybody would start agreeing more and more, because everybody would have a similar understanding of what these story points mean. But when you join a new team, this might be you might be off, let's say. So why did I pick a 3? I think like it's not a very complicated component. So you have a simple list here with a few icons. So in this highlighting, this adds some complexity, but shouldn't be too difficult, like using route parameters or something. Then, of course, like the collapsing on desktop, this adds a bit of complexity. We will need to have a state probably. Yeah, so that maybe would make it a 2, maybe also a 3, and then we have different design on mobile. So the navigation bar itself looks pretty similar, but we have this overlay, so we will need to make some changes here. Yeah, so as you can't discuss it here, I will pick a 3, and let's continue with the next ticket. So the sidebar navigation, we can move it now to to-do, because it's estimated. And actually, let me change the board property here. I also want to show the story point estimate. Okay, so here we have the 3. So the next ticket is the project list. Let's open that. So the user story goes as this. As a user, I want to see a list of all projects so that I can easily get an overview of the project with the most pressing problems. Okay, here's a screenshot of the designs. And then we have the acceptance criteria, but let's have a look at the designs first. So it's here, this page, but I have it here open in presentation format. I guess this border here, it's not correct. I have to check the design, but so this is the list that we are supposed to implement. Now let's see what kind of task we have. So the acceptance criteria says show a list of all projects as cards according to the API data. Okay, so a card is this one here, for example, or this one. Now, obviously, there is some data, some API that we need to connect to. So this would be one thing we have to keep in mind. Then we have to, like, let's say we get a list of projects with this data. We will have to iterate over this this list, and then render one project card for each of the item in this list. Then let's have a closer look. So here this looks pretty simple. So an icon and a name, then the technology, and then a number of issues in total and the last 24 hours, and then some kind of tag or badge, I guess it's called here in the designs. And then finally we have this link here at the bottom. So it looks pretty simple, but one question is, as I wrote here, I guess. So what happens when we click the View Issues link? This is something that the product manager didn't mention yet. So we can add this as an acceptance criteria. When a user clicks on the View Issues link, the issues page opens with the selected project preset as filter. So basically what that means is that we have this issues board here, and then here the project should be selected. Yeah, so now we can think of an implementation, how this will look like. Probably we will have to track the project filter inside the URL, but I wouldn't add that yet as an acceptance criteria. This is too technical, maybe. Yeah, and then let's see what other comments we have. We also need a ticket for the footer and the page container. So this is something that we don't have a ticket yet for. So we would need to create something like a task here. And then we also have this page container, like this round edge, and then there's a small gap here, which is a bit hard to see. But if we go here, you can see it. It's pretty obvious. So that's correct. Now, as the project manager, we would go here. So we have one ticket for the footer, and then we will create a user story. I won't fill this out for now, but then select an epic. An epic, by the way, it's more like a long-going feature that might take weeks or a month to implement, and a lot of user stories will be grouped as one epic. This epic often goes on the roadmap then, and yeah, it's just a longer going issue. So we have the footer, and then we have the page container, which is not really a user story, I would say, but rather a technical task. So as you can see, we have different kind of tasks here, and like the page container, there's no real user benefit, but it's more like a small technical thing that we need to do. I would also add it to the app skeleton epic, and yeah. So let's move them to the top, but for now, I will just continue with a project list. So we handle both of these comments here, and then there's another comment. So at the moment, we have no idea how this data looks like, and we also have no idea where the API is. So this is typically something that we should mention in the dependencies, and depending on the structure of our team, we might have backend developers who can change the API. Maybe we are all full stack developers who have access to this, to the server, to the API. But maybe we also have a front-end team and a backend team, and then this would actually become an external dependency. And these external dependencies are always a bit tricky, because you never know how long such a task takes. Like the estimate is a bit difficult, you don't really know when you can start with this task. So yeah, you would usually we can create a new section here, external dependencies, and just track this here. So, API endpoint needs to be implemented. And of course, as long as we don't know how the data looks like, it's also hard to understand how difficult this will be, because maybe we need to call one endpoint where all this data is already included. This is what I would assume here, but maybe there's also more endpoints to call, like one for the project and then another one for the statistics or something. But yeah, assuming that the API is ready and that the data is actually like it's only one list of projects, one endpoint, and it gives us all the data. We can do a story point estimation here. If you want, you can again pause the video and make this a bit bigger. You can pause the video and then just check back in when you decided how complicated this is. Oh, by the way, there's also the mobile design, of course, which is in this case, yeah, looks pretty similar. Yeah, so I will count again to 3, and then I will reveal my my choice. 1, 2, 3. So for me, this is again a 3. It's might actually be a 5 as well. We could argue because there's a like API call involved, and you never know. So, but I will go with a 3. What we can do now as the developer team, because there are actually some, we could split this in multiple tasks. This is not like we create one pull request or like we code everything at once. But we can split this again into smaller tasks that we then create a pull request for each task. This is quite handy because otherwise for such a feature, or let's say the next issues page, for example, you will get pretty large pull requests. And this is actually pretty interesting, I think. So let's give this a try. We can actually move this one here since we have estimated it. And now let's create a few tasks. In some tools, like I use Notion here because it just has nice API access for my upcoming React Job Simulator. But usually, like most teams will use something like Jira or ClickUp or like project management tools. But yeah, we can live with this. This is nice enough for our use cases. But yeah, so let's create basically a subtask of this project list user story. The first one, I would say, is creating this the project card component. So we can create this in isolation and then merge it to the main branch, and then continue with the list of projects and the API call. So the first task is create a project card. So this is the task, and we will assign it to the user story. Let's see, what is it? Project list. And there's also the Epic project page, and this is supposed to be a task. Okay, I won't go into the details here now, but we could also add a description just to be sure. To create this in isolation, we can use something like Storybook, so we don't have to add a test page on the application or such. Then the next part would be we actually have this badge here. This looks very simple, and it probably is, but if we have a look at the UI kit, this is a reusable component. So we will create a separate UI kit with different components like this badge, button, then a checkbox, select box, and maybe an input. So we can create another task to implement the badge component. Badge component in UI kit. Okay, so again, this is a task. Epic is project page. Maybe we could also create a Epic UI kit, and then we have again project page, project list here. Okay. I won't estimate those now because it's more like we already estimated the user story. Some teams might estimate these tasks, some might not. Yeah, then let's have a look at the project page again. So we have now the project card, we have the batch component that's used here. Then the next thing is that we need to have the project's overview, the list. So create project list. So I will leave it as this. I think we can also add a description here, include API call, just to remember. And then we can use the projects page, project list, user story, project page, and then this is a task again. Okay, and then the final one I would like to do, because it's not certain how the view issues link will behave until we really have this filter, the issues page and the filters in place. So I will create another task that we can work on later. Connect view issues link with the issues page filters. Okay, again, a task, and then projects page, and the user story is also project list. Okay. So now we can also sort by priority, and the first thing we need to do is create this batch component. Another developer might already start on the project card or the project list with the API call and just wait until the batch or the project card is ready. This is the nice thing if you split everything in smaller tasks. Okay, so we're done with this one here. Yeah, if you're interested, you can still continue watching this with me, and I will go through the issue list and the issue filters now, and also refine and estimate them. So let's have a look at the issue list task. This is again a user story. So as a user, I want to see a list of all issues so I can easily get an overview of the most pressing problems. So here's the design, and then we have a list of acceptance criteria, but maybe you can see this is quite long already. So here's the design, and as you can see, this is a much more complicated component or like page than the projects page. Here we have these filters, which are not part of the of this user story. We will focus here on this part here. Actually, I cannot scroll here, so let me open this again here in this view. Yeah. So we will be working on this list here. Now let's see what the acceptance criteria are. So each issue is shown with its error type message in the first line of the stack trace. So this is this one here. We are missing its error type, its project icon. Let's call it icon error type. This is the icon of the technology. Icon error type message and the first line of the stack trace. So this is here. then a graph showing the number of events in the past 14 days. This is here. And then its status, error warning or info, here, level. Okay, we renamed it from status to level. And then the number of events and users that this happened for. So, okay, this is rather simple, except for the graph maybe. Now, the list is paginated, showing 10 issues per page. You can see at the bottom of the table, we have this previous and next buttons. And then we also have like a number of results here, or pages. This is pretty typical when you have data or tables. Also, like you can think of something like Netflix or Airbnb as well. You always have a list of items, and then you don't want to show like hundreds of items, but rather some of them. And here in this case, we have pagination with 10 items on a page. Then if we click next, the application will load the next 10 items, and so on. So here are probably a few things missing, but yeah, I'm not sure if we need to mention them. The previous button should be disabled when we're on the first page. The design doesn't reflect this, so this is good to mention. So previous button should be disabled on first page. Next button should be disabled on last page. Then we have the checkbox in the table header can have 3 states. Here you can see it already. It's like, this is the partly checked, it's called here. And here we have the checked and unchecked states. So yeah, it should behave in this way. If it's checked, then all of the items have to be checked. So basically, if we go through these unchecked, then this should turn into a checked checkbox. Then partly checked if some are checked and some are not. Then if we uncheck all of these, this should also reflect this. Then the checkbox in the table header updates the issue checkboxes. So this is also kind of clear. If we click here now, I'm not sure what happens, but if this is unchecked and we check it, then everything should be checked. If it's checked and we uncheck it, then everything should be unchecked. This is from uncheck to check, select all issues, from check to uncheck, unselect all issues. Okay. But now what happens when this is partly checked? And I guess this is also what the comment, what if we click on checkbox if it's partially checked? Yes. So the product manager should define this probably from partly checked when clicking on partly checked, then I would say select all issues. Okay, so this is handled now, and then we have this button here. Click the button on top of the table, resolves all selected issues. So we will resolve them, and then depending on the filter here, they will be removed from this list, or and issues are shown as cards on mobile devices. So the mobile design, this now looks a bit different from this. This is a typical table layout, and now this changes to cards on mobile. This might be a bit tricky. Let's see, maybe we can use something like CSS Grid. Yeah, we will have to check. Sometimes, like, designers typically don't know how developers work, and it's hard for them to understand what is feasible and what isn't feasible. So sometimes you will encounter situations where you have a really difficult CSS task or like animations or something like this. and on top of that, like a pressing deadline. So then you would, during this refinement session, you would mention that, hey, if we have the animation or if we have this complicated styling, this might be 18 story points, but if we just have this simple workaround, we can like lower it to 3 or so. This is often very useful to convince the designers or also the product managers to actually make something simpler. And the refinement, as we do it now, is always a good place to discuss issues like this. Yeah, so here's a last comment, and this comment says, let's see, wouldn't it be better to move this to a separate user story? Okay, so here somebody complains that this resolve selected issue, this is actually quite some effort with all the checkboxes here, like the state updating in the header checkbox, and then also like resolving the selected issues. This is an API call and might also have an external dependency again for the backend team. So the suggestion here is to just basically remove these things to another task or user story, and then this user story here, it would only be this list. So the project manager agrees here, and we will simply create a new user story. So let's do this. Resolve issues. This is again, let's create the user template here, user story template. And then I will just copy paste this here. I won't go through the user story. I will do that later, but yeah. So this is again, this is the issues page epic, and yeah, it's a user story. So let's close this one out. We can move this here somewhere to the user list, user story. Now let's open this one again. So now it's a lot more concise, which is nice. And we can actually estimate. So now we don't have the button, and we also don't have the checkboxes. We still have the graph and each of these items plus the pagination. So yeah, let's do the estimation. You can stop the video again to think about the complexity from your perspective. I will count to 3 and then select the appropriate story points from my perspective. 1, 2, 3. So for me, this might be an 8-pointer. My reason is that the graph here, I'm not sure how easy it is to style this. We would probably use some graph library. We would need to find that, evaluate different options, and then it's not really clear how easy it is to really adhere to these designs. Now, if it's difficult, we might go back to the designer and the product manager and say, hey, this is really difficult. It would take days to really match this design, like the rounded corners or something like this. Can we make it like this? And they might accept or not accept. Yeah, but for me, this adds a lot to the complexity of this task. Then this here, depending on the data format, of course, assuming that it's already in the right format, that we have this kind of stack trace and the name and so on. This should be relatively straightforward. Here you can see again the badge that we also created already in the other task. And then another thing that adds complexity is the pagination. I hope, of course, that the API supports pagination, and then that we have some reasonable implementation of pagination on the backend. But yeah, so there are a few uncertainties and also complexities with API calls and this graph. So for me, this is an 8. Now, again, I would like to, we can move this to the to-do column. Now, here, I think it's very valuable to create separate tasks for this user story. And yeah, so we can do like our technical planning among the developers. So first, I would like to break out this graph. This could be a complex task, and I think it deserves its own pull request. So let's create one here. Create graph, yeah, whatever. So this is again a task. Epic is issue page, and then we have a user story here, which is issue list, I guess. Okay, so this is complex. Then we can already render the first page basically. So the issue list task, create issue list. This is again a task, epic, and then we have a user story, issue list. So this is basically this whole thing. Now again, like similar to the project page that we had, we can also just create this simple component here. So let's do that. Create like issue row. We can again do this with a storybook, for example, and just create this component in isolation. Now this is issues page, and then user story, issue list, and then finally we also have the pagination. So create, implement maybe pagination. So this is again a task, issue page, and then this was wrong. So issue list. Okay, and now the issue list would mean like this. Let's maybe call it issue table, and then it's clearer that this also involves the header here. Okay, I think we can reprioritize those, like create issue row, then after that the table, then maybe implement the pagination. So with a row we already have, like this is the requirement for the whole table. Then the table, once we have that, we already have something to show. This might also include the API call. Then the pagination, this is nice, but it's not like the most urgent thing to have. And then I would deprioritize creating the graph here, because users would also live without it, and the product manager might also just say like, yeah, for now, let's leave it out and get this feature shipped faster without the graph. Okay, so now we actually have this. Let's also check we might, in this case, want to create a separate task just for the mobile design. Yeah, let me create one, because this is quite different from desktop design. Create So this is also a task. I'm not sure if we should do this or not, but yeah, that's for now. And they should probably come here somewhere. There's a nice feature here, load more. You remember the pagination here? This was previous and next. Now it's only load more. So I assume that we will still see all the other issues and not the second page, but the first and the second page together. I'm not sure if this is covered in the acceptance criteria. No, it's not. So let's add this. The on mobile, the load more button shows the previous and next page together, or run this more items, previous and next pages together. Okay, so you can see that these kind of refinement sessions, they are really valuable, because now we can actually discuss, hey, this is makes sense in the design, but maybe it adds a lot of development overhead for us, because we handle the pagination to like different cases. It also depends on the loading mechanism and stuff like this. So let's keep it for now. I would also, like the story point estimate, I would keep it also like this for now. Yeah, and let's move on to the next ticket. Now, I think this can be the last one that we discuss here, just for practice. And these are the issue filters. So let's see. So now it becomes more dynamic, the whole page. The user can select different filters here, and according to the filters, we will have to load different data and show it on the page. So let's see, in the user story, as a user, I want to filter the issue list so I can easily narrow down the list while searching for issues matching certain criteria. Yes, okay, makes sense. And then the designs, we don't have to implement the button, that's part of another story, but these 3 drop-down filters. Okay, so allows filtering for unresolved and resolved issues. This is this button, error, warning, info, okay, status. We should actually rename this to level. Okay, this seems to be outdated design. So just as a side note, never use the design screenshots here, but reference the actual design because they might be outdated here. So let's rename this to level. And then allows filtering for any existing project. Okay, this is this one here. And then every dropdown can be empty, no value selected, to remove a filter. So basically, we should be able to click on this, and then there should be an option to unselect this filter. Yeah, this seems pretty straightforward. There is, of course, the task of connecting this to the API, which isn't really mentioned in the acceptance criteria. This might be one thing to complain about. So show issues according to the filters. So this would now include the changed API call. Yeah, so from my perspective, we can now estimate this. So maybe have a look again at the designs and the acceptance criteria. And I will count to 3 and then reveal my choice. 1, 2, 3. Okay, for me it's a 5. Of course, not sure what you selected. But my reason is that first we have to implement the component here, which shouldn't be too hard if we have something like React Select or something. We probably would use a component library. But we will have to decide how to change the API call and then render the list accordingly. And then probably we will also have to track this in the URL, the filter that we selected. As you can remember from the project's overview, we have this view issues link here. So this is actually now the place where we can connect this. So when you click, for example, on front-end web, the React application view issues, then this would be pre-selected. Yeah. And this will be possible by tracking the filters in the URL. This should probably also be added to the acceptance criteria. Filters should be added to the URL. It's not important, like the exact mechanism doesn't matter here, but yeah. So we have it estimated. Let's go back to the board, and we have the issue filters here. Let's move it down. So now this is the user story, and now let's create separate tasks again, like smaller technical tasks. The first one would be to create the component here, the drop-down component. We have the UI kit again. So the drop-down should go to the, here it's called select. Okay, so select component, and here we have all the different states that are possible. Yeah, we will add this again to our UI kit. So create select component in UI kit. Now let's quickly do this. This is a task, issues page, and then user stories, issue filters. Okay. Then let's see issues. So now we could create one task per filter, or we just create one task for everything. Not sure. Assuming that the API call will be very similar. For example, we just add query parameters for each of those items. I think we can just add one task for all the filters, and that should be okay. Add filters create and connect filters. So this now means that we add filters to the UI. And then we also update the API call. So trigger a new API call with filters and update URL with filters. So I think it doesn't make sense to split this in multiple tasks. Issues page, and then again issue list, issue filters. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there are a few more tasks that we would need to estimate, but I think it doesn't make sense to do this together. There's also a few more in the job simulator where you will have the chance to continue working on this project. There will be a next page, issue details here. The designs aren't finalized yet, but basically you can click on one of these issues here, and then there will be a details page for this issue that also shows such a graph, and then the stack trace and like a list of events. Yeah, this is something that you can build in my job simulator once it's ready. I hope you enjoyed this and you found it valuable. Again, what we did was to first understand how the feature lifecycle works with like product manager and designers involved, then the feature requests, user stories, and then the refinement and estimation part on the side of the developers. Yeah, we refined everything. We estimated it with Storypoints, and then we also created subtasks for most of the user stories. Yeah. If you want to get on the waitlist for my React Job Simulator, I will drop a link in the description, and I hope you enjoyed this. Bye.